"I'm looking for you, who's there?" "Not so friendly, guys. Let's try a legit customer." The smart move for Chris' safety was to hook him up with a company that makes mechanical coins for the disabled, run by a guy named Boren, who at least looks like a serious businessman. But in Chris' eyes, capitalists can be less trustworthy than the mob, yet he had to listen to the smart advice. So the next day, Chris went to meet the boss sister and the finance officer of the company. The newly hired accountant Dana found financial issues during reconciliation. But with so many accounts piling up, they had to bring in a pro like Chris to help with the cleanup. "How long have you been at this company?" 15 years. "Well, I need the books for those 15 years, you jerk." Whether the finance officer was offended or not, he had to hear Chris out. Then Chris met the company founder Boren. The company's accounts involved sales of mechanical fakes, government procurement, tech R&D, and more. All the past accounts needed to be handed to Chris. Boren wanted to know if anyone had pilfered company funds over the years. After accepting the task, Chris headed straight to the meeting room where Dana had already sorted all the books for him. She planned to help Chris with the cleanup, but he said he could handle it all by himself. After laying out 12 shoppers, Chris started organizing the accounts, all thanks to his freakish sensitivity to numbers and an incredible memory. Chris could almost remember everything at a glance and quickly find the incoming and outgoing data. With a sharp memory, Chris wrote down all the accounts, then compared them with the individual receipts or transaction records from history. He marked all the amounts with issues. Thus, Chris tirelessly worked into the night, and when Dana arrived in the conference room the next day, she was blown away by what she saw on the screen. Before she could react, Chris excitedly explained to her that the whole company brought in tens of millions annually. And it was on a steady growth trend, as long as raw materials and expenses didn't skyrocket. Over the years, total revenue had increased, but not at a proportional rate, which meant there were holes showing someone had tampered with the accounts. Talk about guts. Then Chris showed Dana that most people tend to use their go to fixed numbers when they adjust accounts. Apparently, the person changing the accounts liked to use the number 3 in the second place, and just as they were speculating who it might be, the founder's sister suddenly walked in. She first checked on Dana, then asked Chris how it was going. Chris told her that the missing profits amounted to $61.9 million, and that's before counting the cents. To figure out who was involved and how much each got, Chris had to write a report. But that night, finance officer Ed saw a bunch of hitmen at his house. On the table were 2 bottles of insulin, and the guys politely presented Ed with 2 choices. Option 1, he could inject himself to make it look like a suicide, saving his wife from the grave and still cashing in on Ed's insurance payout. Option 2, Ed and his wife get turned into Swiss cheese by bullets. Seems like a choice, but either way, Ed's toast. The hitman didn't say how much Ed had pocketed, and Ed didn't ask. He knew deep down that no matter what he took, it wasn't enough to buy his life. The next day, Chris arrived at the company to finalize his report only to find that workers had wiped half his work clean. Chris was devastated. He's a perfectionist, and unfinished work was sheer agony for his soul. But Bowen told him that the finance officer had committed suicide, and that was no need to investigate further. After saying that, he tossed Chris' payment at him, even though Chris felt like bugs were crawling all over him. But Bowen decided to drop it, leaving Chris with no choice, while the matter was way more complicated than he thought. Facing his disappointment over not achieving perfection, Chris vented his emotions at his friend's farm. Little did he know, the hitmen targeted the old couple but didn't want to harm them. They merely pointed a gun at the old lady, compelling her to call Chris inside. Despite the names being different, the pronunciation remains the same. Chris sensed trouble inside. The loud bangs from outside had his big beard nearly quaking in his boots. To save his skin, he took the old couple along, and the 3 of them hopped in a car to make a getaway. But Chris stepped out and shut the engine, then without hesitation turned to the pickup. Slamming on the brakes, he flung both old folks to the front of the vehicle. To them, Chris looked like an accountant with sniper skills. They never imagined for a moment that Chris would maintain complete composure in such a sudden and intense situation. Jerk. You damn jerk. You jerk, you jerk. You're really driving me crazy. You jerk, you jerk. You're really driving me crazy. You jerk, you jerk. What an odious creature you are. You jerk, I seriously will kill you both. This is exactly how it is. This time, Chris didn't heed the wise advice of the brain trust. He stubbornly parked the car outside Dana's apartment, then geared up and headed to the entrance. He glanced around and saw that someone had trailed Dana. Without a key, Chris seized an opportunity to slip in through the back door. Meanwhile, Dana had made it to her floor in the elevator, evading the car behind her and hustling to her apartment. That's when Chris found his chance and snuck in through the back door. While Dana was already up to her floor, the guys in black didn't follow directly, instead opting to send 2 delivery men in first. Unbeknownst to Dana, she quickly dashed into the bathroom just as Chris reached the corner.